Welcome to the Real Talk with C and H, the podcast that promotes real talk and real growth. Today's topic is a very powerful one. Before we go to the topic, the tradition in this podcast, we love to introduce ourselves. My name is Cyprian Katongo Jr., and I'm the co-host also of Real Talk with C and H. And at this particular time, I allow my co-host also to introduce himself.
Thank you very much, Mr. Katongo. My name is Hussein Dodia, and I'm the co-host of Real Talk CNH.
Today, being episode 12, we're looking at a very very powerful and at the same time interesting topic, which is navigating leadership, the impact of corruption on the development of a nation. Before we go deep to the topic at hand, allow my co-host as usual on this show or this podcast of ours, my co-host always has that that vibe, to deduce and break down the topic at hand. Allow my co-host to break down.
Thank you, Mr. Katongo. As the title itself explains, the impact of corruption on the development of a nation. So we're basically looking at how corruption affects nations and institutions, and how that corruption is filtered into different systems of government, and how it trickles down to the different levels of local government and up to the community. And on a wider scale, how it affects the community at large, the people that are actually supposed to benefit from these systems. Corruption can either be individual, or it can be systemic. What I mean by that is that corruption can either be performed by one person or a small group of individuals, or it can be performed from throughout all levels of government or areas of a nation, which means that it is sort of embedded in the system. This makes it more difficult to get rid of than individual corruption.
Powerful stuff. Like I said on our podcast, we talk with C and H. My co-host, Mr. Dodia, loves that passion and to break down the topic at hand. And it's interesting, when it comes to corruption. Normally, this issue is always treated, for lack of a better term, when you see corruption cases in the context of Zambia, when people are being arrested, but we don't look at it from the grassroots. So it's important at this particular time to break down the dangers or the implications in term, be it long term, short term, and long term of corruption in terms of when it comes to the development of a nation. So at this particular time, we will start with talking about maybe few sectors of a country, of a nation, so to say. I'll allow my co-host, to briefly, discuss how the short term and long term implication of corruption is.
Yes. No, I think that's a very important question, and I think you're asking the right questions. And in terms of, we'll start with your first question, which you asked about which areas you think that I think are most affected. In my opinion, it is health and mining, because there I believe it is systemic corruption. I don't believe it's individual. I believe it's embedded in the system, and that it needs a complete overhaul. And the dangers of that corruption, as we are feeding right now, is that we cannot finance our economy. We cannot provide the services, the utilities to the people that they need to survive in this economy. So that is the main danger. I would say there's also ripple-on effects. Obviously, there's nepotism, there's job losses, there's the idea that that corruption is sort of increasing the poverty gap, there's a lot of truth to that, but I think the main reason for that is mismanagement, although you could align some of it to corruption as well.
Trust me, those are two areas you've mentioned there. Just to add on, those are very instrumental. Be it just to break down the context of why you strongly think why I'm supporting your two areas, rather sectors, health and mining. Mining can be broken down into this sense, so to say. mining is a source of income which can also contribute to the national, national development or
national budget.
yeah, in that sense. So if we see a situation whereby the mining, which I like to think in Zambian context, it has, let's just put it, it's one of the highest sources of income when it comes to developing of Zambia. So if we see a situation whereby, I love the point you used to say systematic corruption. So now the question beg to to differ with the narrative to say we should allow things to go to bad, and then we react. Then the topic at hand, we're looking at navigating leadership. So my point, to just to add on to the points you mentioned earlier on, the two sectors rather, it's important that leaders put into consideration to say you're in a position of power. Be it, for example, let's start with the mining we're talking about right now. Mining, if you are in a position of power, it's important that you factor in the effects of you being in that position. You are able to change the system, but you are neglecting, and you know that in the long term, the impact will be felt. So now to marry with the health sector, we're looking at the recent withdrawal of America, the US, the aid. Yeah. So that again on its own, we shouldn't be too dependent. I like to think many intellectuals out there have read about dependence theory, which entails to say nation depending on another nation to develop, which should be the case. So mining, the sector you have used there as a prime example, which can generate income for a nation, I think there's need to look also into mining, find out what's happening. Why is it that the Zambians are not benefiting? Then once we establish that, like I mentioned earlier on in our introduction, to say we need to find the root causes of corruption. And these two sectors, if we find the root cause of mining, what's happening in mining, why is it that money is not being, spread
Amongst the people.
amongst the people? You should
Or
question.
why is there no value
in
being
that sense.
shown
Yeah,
in the economy?
in the economy. So such angles are very important. On this podcast, like we always talk about, we have always do it deliberately to bring in fresh perspectives of yes, to other people to be sensitive. But for us, it's a real talk, we'll see. So having said that, once the mining is all set and Zambians are benefiting on a massive scale, we see a situation whereby even the health sector can benefit from that. And also agriculture also can benefit from that. Education can benefit from that. So the two areas are very important to discuss as we go deeper. So I just wanted to expand on the two sectors which you alluded to earlier on. I hand over to you, to break down now the implication of rather the solutions which can be applied when it comes to the generated income from the mining sector to now health sector.
Yes. Okay. Before we go to that, though,
Go ahead.
I would just like to add as well that another area of interest that I think people should know about is energy. It's a sector that now is affecting us the most, but there's a lot of money to be made, and that's the problem with corruption. You see, corruption doesn't happen in small industries. It doesn't happen in your local retail store or your local supermarket. It happens in multinationals, in companies that are as big as nations and nations. The reason being is because the corruption's main focus is greed. The money is too big, you see, to ignore. So I think the beginning of fighting this beast or this monster that's called corruption is looking at our leaders and seeing, are these the people who can be swayed by these influences? Because that's the truth. Yeah. When it comes to medication, when it comes to health, when it comes to energy, when it comes to minerals, anything that involves big money, expect corruption. It's going to exist. The issue is how you deal with it, right? How you deal with it. And the truth is, at the individual level, me and you can only do so much. We can we can be an activist, we can launch so many podcasts, we can launch so many episodes and talk about it, but the truth is leaders are the ones who are going to deal with it. Now, this is where it becomes very tricky, because it's important to understand that yes, we do need these investors, these people that come to help us run the economy, but that is all they should be, is just assistance on the side. They shouldn't be our main source of income. And this is where I think we need to flip the script, is that we need to start reinventing our investment policies. I think that is where we need to start. If we're going to allow this trend to go on for generations, for future leaders to come, we need to set a good basis, a good foundation for things to be done correctly. Now, I know they've also recently, government in the past 2 or 3 months has released the Mines and Minerals Act. They've released a few cybersecurity acts, and all these to help curb these issues. But the truth is, what you create in theory does not happen on the ground. We know that, isn't it? When there are policies at your workplace where they tell you that you must work from 8 to 17 hours, but you get there at 9:30 some days you knock off at 16, you see? So the only person who can enforce that policy is the person who watches you, is your leader, is the person who comes and says, oh, where's Mr. Cyprian? How come he's not here? It's only 16. You see what I mean? So these things come from a leader. They don't come from policy. They don't come from laws. They come from the person that sits in the throne, right? So I think that is where we need to start when it comes to.
It's a very powerful angle you have taken there to say, which I'm going to add on also, issues of integrity. We see a situation whereby the example I've given, for something not to happen, entails that the leader should be in a position of also setting a prime example of how things should be managed on a national level. So just to break down the structure of government, or just the structure of leadership in the context of Zambia, it's important from the councillor, what councillors, to MPs, to ministers, up to the president. It's important that there is a pattern which is permanent when it comes to the context of, integrity. Integrity here, we're looking at, a leader who's consistent in implementing policies. Like you mentioned earlier, you cannot just implement the policy based on the theory aspect.
Yes.
It's important that you be a practical leader. And for you to be a well-loved leader, you need to have integrity. And I like to think, just not in Zambia, we can use different African countries. Sure. I like to think there's a similar issue which is happening. You're quite right, there have been measures which have been put in place to curb corruption and everything. But today we're looking at not only focusing on arresting people, finding the root cause. Just to bring back the audience who are watching us, we need to discuss and find solutions of the root causes of corruption, just in general. What makes someone to be in a position of power to not to be reluctant? No, I'm in a position of power. I think this is my opportunity not to even buy new cars, new plots. So it's important that leaders have that integrity. At the same time, remind themselves to say, I was put in power for a reason. The masses put me in power so that I alleviate the poverty which many are facing. So you cannot be a leader preaching about corruption. On the ground, nothing is happening. Exactly. Yeah, quite right, they can be arrested. Like I mentioned earlier, they can be arrested. Those are very important. We're not disputing or
Yes, no, for sure.
being against that. It's important also to
You must take action.
but it's important also go deeper into your, like the structure I gave earlier on, to say from work council up to even the presidential office. It's important that there's auditing, extreme auditing, for lack of a better term, extreme auditing which takes place every time. I know there's parliamentary committees which sit by the National Assembly, but just to make it clear, are people aware of such? So now this comes back now to the awareness, the issues of contract. Yeah, we're not disputing government's work, because these days there's misinformation. No, those people, the two of them, when they real talk with CNH, no, they are against the government. No, we're not against the government. We're looking at the angle of reasoning and just being realistic, because the two of us were realists. So it's important that those parliamentary committees which sit and look at how the auditing is being done, from ward councillor to ministerial level, it's important that they make it known to everyone. The reason I'm bringing that point is for people, someone who's selling charcoal, I don't know, to understand that what's happening here is happening. The effect, the short-term and long-term effects, that person selling charcoal can feel. It's important that awareness is spread to such people. And just to start with the solution, because here on our podcast, we always talk about the real things and at the same time also provide the solutions. We cannot just be also just talkers. And
About
then,
problems.
yeah,
We just share our problems.
yeah, we're not solving anything. So,
Yes.
solution number one, social media influencers are there. You can make use of them. If the parliament is having parliamentary committees, engage social media content creators also. And then at the same time, that's provide employment to them in a long-term goal, so to say, setup. So involve local social media content creators so that people, the masses, are aware of the parliamentary committees which sit down to talk about corruption from the source. For you to fight corruption, you need to make the masses to be aware of what's happening. You cannot be talking about corruption only on the basis of just arresting. So I just wanted to expand on that. That's the beauty of the podcast. The we talk with CIDH. We love to expand and make the audience understand why we're passionate about talking about real things. Having said that, this particular time I'll allow Mr. Dodia, to briefly give the audience the solutions, how to address corruption. I think at this particular time.
No, thank you very much, Mr. Katongo. And your point has been very expressive and completely right. The only place I would maybe tweak
Go ahead, my brother.
your suggestion a bit is that the idea that you can fight corruption from the bottom up will never work. People look to something greater than them when they want to achieve, right? They don't look at what the person below them is doing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's very important that the corruption fight starts from the top, right? From the executive office, from the president, from cabinet, from ministers, from provincial ministers. When people see those people dealing with corruption, then the rest fall in line. The idea that you can fight corruption from the grassroots, from the grounds here, and maybe help change things it's plausible, but it only happens in revolutions. And no one wants a revolution.
Yeah, no.
Because a revolution involves war.
Yeah, which
It
is
involves
not
civil war.
context
Yes,
of,
which is not in the way of democracy, right? So it's very important that the people who are dealing with corruption deal with it from the top first, because that way it fizzles out as it goes down, lower and lower. Remember, the big money is shared at the top, and then it slowly trickles down. But if there's nothing being shared, then nothing happens, right? It means that the whole system rots. It dies on its own, and no one else can use it. So that, I believe, is the first way that you deal with corruption. Secondly, is there has to be consequences. Like you said, you can't just, we don't condemn anyone, and I know there's been arrests and what, but it's the beginning. You see what I mean? There's so much that goes on in the background that we don't know about, you see? Many people, I believe, are used as scapegoats for corruption. You arrest this one so that this one doesn't get caught. Arrest that one so that that one doesn't get caught. That's what I believe. You see? So even then, it's a very showtime fight. It must be dealt with at national level, yes, at the top, at not even at parliamentary level. It's too low. Yeah.
Just to add on, on our podcast, Real Talk with CNH, we love to, to be direct. I've loved that angle. Just reminded me the point I mentioned earlier on to say integrity. Trust me, it's very important, to look at also starting with those at the top. My angle, not disputing with you, agreeing with you, because the two of us are passionate about national issues. I was looking at it from the different angle of once I've dealt with the top, like I mentioned earlier on to say integrity. If a leader has integrity, means that person has put into place systems or frameworks which can be utilized so that others below him or her, they follow it. Yes. So at the end of the day, you're able, if everything, the system is clear or clean, you're able now to see from the grassroots also to say what's happening on the ground. It's easy. Those at the bottom cannot use loopholes. Yes. So it's important. I love the point you have emphasized. The first step also, just to add on to my point I mentioned, that to say you need to start at the top, which is true. Yeah. Then at the end of the day, also you go down. Once you do such, use such methods or approaches towards corruption, I think you're in a better position, to address number one and also provide long-term solutions at the end of the day. Yeah. So at this particular time, I want to get your views in line with the consequences of corruption now, just in general now when it comes to Zambians, every Zambian, before go to rural areas.
To be honest, I believe in my opinion, there are no consequences to corruption in Zambia. I believe. No real consequences. I believe the fight has been, if it is starting, then maybe it's only starting now. But in the past 15 to 20 years, I do not believe that we have truly dealt with the problem. Because like I said in the beginning, we're dealing with institutionalized, systematic and systemic corruption. It's corruption where even though you replace someone today, the system still runs. Even though you fire someone today, the system still runs. You could fire 500 people today and that system will still run because the system has already been set up to distribute the odds, you see? So the only way I feel that you can, going back before we, there's no, like I said, I've mentioned there's no consequences, I believe. I don't know, maybe people out there might believe otherwise. But the only way I really feel you can deal with that is to uproot all the systems. You have to start from, like I said, you have to start from from the foundation. And not the foundation of the people, no. The foundation of how are we going to distribute. We have to change the ways we distribute CDF. We have to change the ways we distribute FISIP. We have to change the way we distribute mining royalties. We have to change the way we distribute aid. Everything has to change, you see, because those systems have already been compromised. You could put 200 of the best people and they still wouldn't be able to correct it. The reason being is because it has already been set up in a way that it benefits those people even without people touching it, without touching the system. They don't have to touch it anymore. And this is why I also feel there's been slow progress towards electronic platforms in government. I mean, we're in a situation now where we're in the 21st century and AI has come out and we're still using files in government offices. Computers that are as old as my father's desktop. You know what I mean? So you can tell that there's very little that is being done to monitor, to evaluate what's happening. It's all paperwork, and once that paperwork disappears, like it never existed. You see what I mean?
That's again.
Yeah. So to get back to your question, do I think there's consequences to corruption? No, I don't think there is consequences.
And just to bring back the point I mentioned earlier on, to utilization of social media content creators. No, it's important because these they're able to reach the masses. They cannot be used as political tools. No.
Yes.
Let's be correct on that one.
Yes.
And clear on that one. Like you mentioned, when 21st century, it's important that information reaches the masses. It's disseminated in a way that, like example I gave, someone who's selling charcoal is able to understand what's happening. You get my point, huh? So it's important, and also social media content creators are engaged, but at the same time with caution that they shouldn't be used as political tools. The focus should be on the masses. At the end of the day, let's keep politics. The reason why in power is to,
Is to make people's lives better.
better. So
you know, it's funny that you said
yeah,
that. Sorry.
yeah.
Someone asked me that today.
Mm.
And I said, look, the truth is, the fact of the matter is, the reason why you put people in power is to make your lives better.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
Mm.
That's why we choose leaders. That's why we do this, because we believe without a doubt in our mind that these people will make our lives better. Right? No one just votes for someone because he exists or because he's on the ballot. No, there has to be a reason that you're voting for this person. You see? Is it his character? Is it his education? Is it his what? And when it comes down to it, anyway, before we go there,
Yeah,
I
go
think
ahead,
we
brother.
should.
That's a real talk.
When
Go ahead.
when it comes down to it, it's important that we also look at these qualities. You see what I mean? Because yes, like that was from our very beginning of our podcast. That's where we started, the foundation. Huh? Qualities, integrity, patriotism. You need to have some sort of identity in yourself for you to lead people. Because if you don't, you'll be pulled here and there. And like I said, these industries have billions and billions of dollars going through them. If you can't manage it, my brother, you'll be on the gravy train, and that's it, and you'll forget about everyone else. It's very easy, you see. So there has to be some sort of even in social media content creators, like you said, they need to be careful of what they're distributing, what they're sharing, because at the end of the day, you could be damaging your young cousin, your young sister, your what. People associate you with these people. You see, when they see you taking pictures together, when they see what, I know it seems like all fun and games, but in today's world, life is on the internet. You're going to meet very few people in person. The only people you're going to meet are the people you live with, the people in your country, the people you what, but the 10,000, 20,000, 100,000 followers on your, it's highly unlikely that you'll meet all of them. You know what I mean? So people judge you by your profiles, by what you post, by your daily activity. So I think it comes down.
I love the point where you've you've brought out to say, in as much as I suggested the idea of using social media content creators, it's important also them having a character which also aligns with national development. They shouldn't be too much of political. They shouldn't be used as political tools, like I mentioned, but they should have this value because they also their extension.
They have value.
The extension of like I said, disseminating information, which is of national development. So if these also, the character is very important, like I've mentioned. So also social media content creators need to factor in having good quality character traits. Can you just pick any social media content creator just to add on to what you are saying? Because it will defeat the purpose. Because at the end of the day, they will be moved at Kwalora. So it's important, the way you put it, it's important also to myself also to factor in also to say, in as much as I'm suggesting the use of social media content creators, but we need to also be careful in the selection of social media content creators. Sure. And at the same time also, government, be it ministerial level, departments, whatever, they should also be mindful of how they are, disseminating information. Definitely. It shouldn't be just on a political angle to say, no, it should benefit us. Focus on benefiting the Zambians. The social media content creators are in a position, many people watch them. They can be followed, like you have mentioned, in personal level, but they can be watched.
Yes.
So if information, which, like you have said, issues of fouls, people are not aware of the stages of how corruption is being tackled. Yes. Not everyone is able to tune into parliamentary TV, or parliament TV. No one is able to do that. So if you use social media content creators, in a better position as a government official, to disseminate that information and make the masses to be aware under the brackets of not using them as political tools.
For sure.
And having said that, I think at this particular time, let's look at also, we have looked at health, the implication of how corruption can affect health. Let me bring back to the point you mentioned earlier on to say mismanagement of things, how the Ministry of Health can be, can be beneficial in terms of the long run, beneficial to the people. Let me break down my point of view, because the initial is important also to make sense of what you're talking about. You're not supposed to confuse people.
No, for sure, for sure.
So my point, I'm trying to bring out is, like you mentioned, it's important that to dismantle every system. Dismantle every system. If you see this system, you can fire someone, then the issues pertaining was still continuing. Dismantle everything. Start afresh, and make sure that the focus is on the delivery aspect of the masses.
Yes.
So from there, I like to think we'll be in a better position on not even depending on foreign aid, because the resources will be
No, definitely. You're right.
resources,
You're absolutely
and then
right.
also sectors, other sectors,
That's
like
right.
I mentioned.
The idea that
Yeah.
Zambia doesn't have money is a lie.
Yeah.
Is a lie. We have all the money in the world. It's just how we manage resource. That's what it comes down to. Exactly what you said.
So it's important that they factor in that also, and then from there, we'll be able to see situations whereby even the quality of health workers is improved, and the health workers will be motivated. Won't have brain drain whereby others are going abroad. We'll have them in Zambia, but provided that infrastructure and also the frameworks which can be used in terms of salaries, increment, and also their livelihoods, be it good housing also. This brings me back now to the point I wanted to mention later on, rural areas. I want to look at it in a general view, be it teachers, be it health workers.
Yes.
Well, those two, I think, can be instrumental, and also agriculture. I want to get your views before we wrap up our very powerful conversation.
How corruption works
Yeah.
in the way I think
Yeah.
it operates in those areas.
Mm.
I
On a
think
rural setup.
in a rural setup, I think it's non-existent, almost. I think very few, if any, drugs go to rural areas. If they do, that's well and good. But I think in terms of rural areas, the corruption is not as bad, if it is, as compared to higher up. Because the truth is, like I said from the beginning, that's where the cake gets cut from, you see. So the first people get the biggest pieces. You see what I mean? If we're talking about rural areas, I would say the biggest drawback is in terms of foreign aid, which is what we're dealing with now, which is drugs that are not reaching the people they're supposed to get to. That, I would say, is the biggest corruption barrier our people face. And it's also a very dangerous one, because we need HIV, TB, drugs are expensive to manufacture and to buy, you see. So that $50 million worth of aid, even though we've heard stories that the Chinese are going to replace this aid, we haven't dealt with the problem. So yes, the Chinese might even double the amount. They might even say, we'll give you $100 million. But will the aid get to the poor people? We don't know.
And how best can that area not be improved?
In my opinion, I would say is you'd have to do the same. You would have to reinvent the system. And this is where I think, even as you come in as a leader, is where you're going to spend a lot of your time if you want to clean up. If you truly want to clean up, I would say you would spend almost half your term, or maybe less, just dealing with creating those new systems.
Agriculture?
Agriculture, in terms of rural areas?
The rural areas, yes.
Ah.
The best way they can also be helped also.
All of them, the same. the same. I would say it across the board. I wouldn't leave out any industry, because every industry has to remember what we said in the beginning. We're dealing with systemic and systematic, corruption. So it has to be a situation where when you come in, you change the way this system operates. You change the way this system operates. You change the way the system. Because what happens is that you come in and you sit in the middle of the spider web, and that's all you do. You see what I mean? So it's very hard for you to deal with this issue, deal with this issue. You end up in a situation where you're firefighting. You see? This comes up, you deal with that. This comes up, you deal with that. This comes up, you deal with that. You have to have your own goal and say, okay, look, when I come in, this is what I'm going to do. And this is the way I'm going to deal with it. When it comes to corruption, I'm going to revamp the system. I'll make the consequences harsh. If it means increasing the prison sentence, if it means dealing with them in other ways, I don't know. Some sort of penalties that can be increased or fines, then it has to be a situation where you're creating you're building the foundation from scratch. You must build it from scratch and start building it. You can't spend your time making deals, and your country is in the toilet. You have to spend the majority of your time fixing what's happening in your country. In your second term, you can start, or towards the end of then, when everything is okay at home, then start making deals. You know what I mean? Because you know that even if you're not there and the money comes in and it flows, things are going to run. Yeah. The money, the product will get to where it is. The foreign aid will get to where it is. CDF will get to where it's supposed to go. FISIP will get to where it's supposed to go. You don't even have to be there. And even if you come out in the following term, you say, hey, at least I left a system that works. Yeah.
And I've loved the way you've also brought out FIPS, which is Farmers Input Support is a program or plan program, which is also instrumental in terms of for the local rural area farmers also. I've loved the way you have generalized also, because that also falls under education. You cannot send teachers in a way in a rural area, which is very bad. And having said that, I think at this particular time, I think we can end on this one, because we don't want
Yes.
to
No, definitely.
exhaust our
Yes. No.
audience. I'll give you the floor, to summarize what we've been discussing.
No, definitely. I think the importance is that we need to look at how we are seriously going to deal with the corruption fight. I think we have been dealing with it for too long, or we've been ignoring it. Sorry, for too long, and in some cases maybe even denying it. But it's come to a situation where it will really start affecting people, and I mean in a really negative way. You know, a situation where you don't have an aid for ARVs and tuberculosis, within a year and a half, people start dying. Your population starts dying. So it's no more about, oh, they'll survive. They won't. It's not going to happen unless there's something to make sure that they do survive. So if we're not careful, that is where we'll start heading. We will start heading to a situation where we'll start decimating our population. We will start destroying our people, and Zambia will become, you know, a free town for foreign investment, while the Zambian people are living in poverty. You know, there are a lot of economies, Nigeria, Brazil, who else can even Mexico, very thriving economies. But 60, 70, 80% of the population is poor. And yet they call themselves rich. We're rich countries. You're rich per GDP capita, you're rich per this, all these things on paper. But in reality, you're not. And that is where we will end up if we're not careful.
On that powerful note, by the way, that's a very powerful conclusion there.
Thank you very much.
You have captured the essence of our discussion. This has been the Real Talk with CNH, and I've been your co-host, Cyprian Katongo Jr., and as usual, my brother here, Mr. Hussein Dodia, a passionate man, as usual. Join us next week for another powerful and interesting episode. Wishing you all the best, and feel free to share your comments. We'll get back to you and respond to them. Have a blessed weekend.
Thank you.